Welcome to Save Every Universe. My name's Robbie. I'm one of your co-hosts. Alec and I had some difficulty in scheduling this week, so I thought this would be a great opportunity to look back at one of our episodes about gamer toxicity. You know, with games like Fallout 76 and Anthem coming out, and then games like Red Dead Redemption and God of War, we've heard a lot about the best games and the worst games, and oh my god, this is incredible, and oh my god, this is a pile of garbage. I think we're too quick maybe to go to our extremes. We're too quick to be condemning. And I don't know. I think it's hard to tell the difference right now. It's hard to hear voices of reason. I think maybe this is a good time to reflect and think about maybe pumping the brakes on our venomous opinions, because we're quick in this world to jump to 10, jump to straight with off with their head type declarations. And I think maybe we should try harder to slow down, think about it, and use degrees. We need to implement more degrees in our opinions and have some more variance. So please look back with us on this episode. We talk about ratings and other things like Rotten Tomatoes and Martin Scorsese. Please enjoy.
On this episode, we say dumb things aggressively with some big words sprinkled on top. Welcome to Save Every Universe. My name is Alec Garcia. I am a YouTuber who takes racist jokes way too far because, hey, no one seems to mind but the billion-dollar advertisers.
My name is Robbie. I'm a young man who witnessed the fall of the Flying Graysons, and after deducing the identity of the Dark Knight, fought and trained my way to earning my place at his side.
Very nice. Who were you last week?
Last week, I was Noble 6 from Halo Reach.
Awesome. Yeah, and I was Ezio Auditore de Firenze, and I know we have some listeners in Europe, and I just apologize if you have any Italian heritage, and I totally butchered that.
It's also a tribute, though. Maybe we should spin it that way. We forgot to say this in our last episode, but 2 episodes ago, we had Ashley on. She was Flemeth from Dragon Age.
Today we were talking about, really the root of this whole conversation was there was an article that came out, or some tweets that came out, I guess. Kotaku wrote an article about it. A designer and programmer, Charles Randall, he published a string of tweets talking about how he won't publish specific details about games and about development because gamer culture is so toxic. And there was sort of a flurry of things that happened around that got us thinking just about the broader picture of how media and the internet and all those things has impacted gaming, YouTube reviews, all those kinds of things. What have you on the docket today, Robbie?
Oh, real quick, I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to our self-proclaimed greatest fan, Boss Charlie. He's in
Boss Charlie.
He's in our DoD Charlie Destiny clan.
Yeah.
He was more excited about our Tuesday episode coming out. More excited about that than the Star Wars trailer. So thank you for your enthusiasm and your dedication.
Yeah, he told everyone to stop talking about the Star Wars trailer to listen to our episode. Very clearly not a rational thing to do.
I don't share his enthusiasm, but I admire it.
We don't even share it.
But it's a milestone that we have a greatest fan.
Yeah, that's true.
So thank you, Boss Charlie, for starting us on this path. So I think this is a kind of an interesting topic just because, one, I think I struggle with it just because I don't tend to be somebody who values the general public opinion of media or creation or whatever.
Right.
In fact, I wrote down here, I don't know if I'm even qualified to talk about this since the man in the arena, the Teddy Roosevelt, it is not the critic who counts. I mean, I have that pinned up on my desk at work, so I can read it every day. However, this is kind of interesting because technology has allowed for this to happen. So it's kind of crazy that we can even address this at all.
Right.
And let me start by saying it's a little bit hypocritical that we common people with a microphone are now addressing what happens when you give a common person a microphone and how that sways public opinion.
That is true, except for, let me read one of the quotes. It's off the Kotaku article, but they're quoting the guy's tweets, and he said, "Forums and comment sections are full of specialists who are just waiting for any reason to descend on an actual developer. See any thread where some dumbass comments on how easy it would be to, say, add multiplayer or change engines. Any dev who talks candidly about the difficulty of something like that just triggers a wave of people questioning their entire resume. Questioning here being an absurd euphemism for being a target for an entire faction of gamers for harassment or worse." As I read that, I'm going to get a little high and mighty here. I felt like we were more on the side, especially with like the Destiny 2 review, our 80,
it was not a review. It was not a review. We discussed it.
But we were a little bit more on the side of that, saying like, that's probably really freaking hard. And a lot of really big major franchises don't reinvent their engine every time they release a sequel. And that's not a fair standard. And that's probably bullshit. And I feel like we were a little bit more on the side of give developers developers the benefit of the doubt. I think you and I tend to be a little bit more on the side of gaming culture can be toxic. You shouldn't be racist and you shouldn't be a douchebag and you should, you know what I mean? So I'm going to go ahead and give us a point in that column, even though you're trying to be all
well, here we are giving ourselves points, but okay, well, let's start with a little bit more of a big picture. We now are in a time where, first of all, there's something good about this. Like, I like that we now have the ability to directly interface with developers. Before the internet, before like what it is now, like you could have never done something like this.
Right.
So I'm not bashing all of it. I'm not saying like you leave it to the professionals and you shut the fuck up. Like, I'm not saying anything like that, but it's almost like we're starting to get into an era of, okay, well, if you rage on something, it's clickbait. And now we're starting to get into what I would say is almost hypocritical of YouTube professionals, which is weird because they're not professional developers, they're not professional coders. They're just
not even professional like journalists who understand principles of investigating a topic deeply before reporting opinion on it or anything.
So we're starting to create this industry because it's an industry. These guys this is their career, like your character that you chose to be this week. By inflammatory language and hate, you're making money off of that. Right. And so you're commercializing rants. This is crazy to me. Like, if you really take a step back and think about this from like a big picture perspective, this would never, you couldn't make a business out of this. I mean, there was some yellow journalism, isn't that what it was called? The sensationalism journalism that started cropping up.
Which is it was closer to what all the YouTube-y stuff is than anything else.
And so we're starting so just big picture, and what we can get back into, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little, maybe too zoned out here, but it's a little crazy to me that we're starting to see the loss of the integrity of the true, maybe what's closer to a true voice, and starting to gain that sensationalism because it sells, and now we're getting further away from the truth, and even representing maybe what's closer to the honest opinion of the people.
Yeah, I mean, like, using the Destiny 2 thing as an example, where there's those, like, I quit Destiny 2, it's trash. Like, how much clickbait is that? It's not trash. Like, if you put it up against so many other games, there's a lot of really great things about it. So it's, you get into the zone where people are putting things up that are clearly just clickbait to get video views, to get ad dollars, and there's really no integrity to thoughtfully putting together a comprehensive review of something. While we're zoomed out, I do actually want to talk about, too, because this, I found this today and it was on the news and stuff, about Martin Scorsese he was just ripping Rotten Tomatoes, talking about a very similar thing about toxic review culture that's in film as well. And he says, the brutal judgmentalism that has made opening weekend grosses into a bloodthirsty spectator sport seems to have encouraged even more brutal approach to film reviewing. The filmmaker is reduced to a content manufacturer and the viewer to an unadventurous consumer, end quote. Which is one of my beefs with that in gaming too, is if someone doesn't like a game, there ends up being this tidal wave of hate against something that no one's even played yet, which is just batshit crazy. And there's a lot of games, just as there are a lot of movies that, they don't get good reviews and they aren't well liked and they don't have good sales numbers, and they're really good games in their own right, like for their own reasons, but you don't know that until you play it for yourself, which I think there's a really relevant parallel there with Scorsese. And he goes on to say that as film criticism written by passionately engaged people with actual knowledge, and this is what you were talking about, actual knowledge of the film history, has gradually faded from the scene. It seems like there are more and more voices out there engaged in pure judgmentalism. People seem to take pleasure in seeing films and filmmakers rejected, dismissed, and in some cases ripped to shreds. And
it almost reminds me of that. Do you remember in the original Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire, where William Dafoe gives that speech about the only thing better than a hero is to watch a hero fall? You know what I mean? It kind of reminds you of that, of like how much people, gladiatorial blood sport is a good way of putting it. It's like we revel in this destroying. But anyway,
not in seeing fine art, if we can just bastardize that phrase.
Sure.
But in like art, not in something being created, but in something being ripped apart for sport.
So that's
what it's turning into. Like the internet culture around gaming and around entertainment in general, clearly, because it's happening with film as well, is that there's more joy from ripping something apart for fun than there is in just appreciating what someone else created.
Yeah, so let's qualify this a little bit and like kind of apply it a little more. How much do you personally, and since we're talking about, we'll dabble in movies too a little bit. How much do you allow those types of just reviews in general, or what the critics are saying? How much does that influence like what you choose to ingest or view or play?
I think I would be lying if I said it didn't influence me. But especially actually since we've been doing this podcast, I've been thinking like more and more about the media that surrounds the the gaming industry, and I've been trying to be more objective, I think, with like what I play and why I play it. So like SteamWorld Dig 2, like I didn't look up any reviews for that. I just checked it out, watched like a little game footage of it, and I was like, that looks like a really cool little platformer. I got it and I loved it, and I'm really glad I bought it. And I didn't check out any of the reviews, but it's like, it's really, really hard, especially after you watch a couple, all my YouTube suggested videos now are like gaming stuff, right? It's everywhere. Once you're in sort of the gaming culture world online, that it's really hard to not let other people's opinions sway what you buy and what you think of it before you buy it.
Well, and these guys have gotten good at it. They're convincing and they're passionate and they've made a business out of it and they're good at it. I think as I've seen this trend cropping up over the last 5-10 years, I found myself going away from it, but that's not always good either. Like, I'm not trying to be all hipster about it. Like, I do avoid those types of things in general, but it's also led me to do things like pre-order games that maybe I shouldn't have, or go see The Dark Tower, which was a mistake. And even though people critics tried to warn me, I was like, oh, what do they know? I don't need the man telling me. I don't need these manufactured, these businesses
so let's
telling me
take Dark Tower as an example, though. Like, I didn't read the book, I didn't watch any reviews, and I just went into it with like a totally open mind. And I thought it was not the greatest movie I ever saw. I probably won't watch it again, but it was like, I didn't feel like I got ripped off. Like, I thought it was like a nice little popcorn sci-fi movie. And so I think there should be, I guess what I'm saying is I think there should be more of that, where people go into things with open minds to just experience something on their own terms, in their own frame of mind, and come to their own conclusion. I think Scorsese says something similar to this. People are buying and consuming and evaluating art, film and video games and even books and stuff the same way they buy a damn vacuum cleaner off Amazon. And that's not fair to this artist who created something.
I will say, though, I have always valued the opinions of like friends, and sometimes there are friends who you're like, well, he has shit taste anyway, like I'm gonna ignore his recommendation. And then you have friends who you're like, oh, you didn't like that, and it kind of makes me pause. I've always done that, and it's a little strange if I step back and like analyze that, because that means I'm putting more value. It's not like they're qualified, but because they're my friends and they have similar interests, I guess I automatically think, oh, if that game sucks, maybe I should think more carefully about it. So I don't have a problem with that if I respect their opinion. But there's almost something now about a mass-produced criticism that makes me go, I'll decide for myself. Like, I almost have to see it. Is it really
it starts to smell funny.
Bad?
Like, so like Call of Duty Infinite Warfare, right? Like the worst reviewed trailer in YouTube history and all this stuff. Like, played the campaign, and the campaign was pretty fun. Like, it wasn't the best Call of Duty ever, but I agree with what you're saying. Like, the tidal wave of just hate, and it was clear just jumping on the bandwagon, and people weren't thinking for themselves, and it was groupthink. It sent up a red flag for me that, like, okay, I am going to check this out for myself, because that's totally unwarranted.
Yeah, and I think Scorsese's criticisms are fair because, and the Kotaku article talks about how some of these developers are starting to be afraid of the people they're creating
the product
for. And it's like, what is that? When you start creating like an atmosphere where the creators are afraid of the fans, or they're worried what everyone's going to think, like, it starts shaping too much, like Scorsese said. It's starting to like twist the creation of the thing itself. And that scares me a little bit. Like, I think that's alarming. And
which is why I think a lot of indie developers are getting so much more attention now. We were talking before we started recording this about Cuphead, that these little unknown sleeper indie developers are creating like these really cool things that no one gives a shit enough about. It's not on the radar enough to criticize and launch YouTube videos about and like start throwing people into the meat grinder. And then it comes out and it's awesome and people like it. But like, anytime a AAA announces, it's like everybody has to put in their 2 cents about, like, Anthem, right? Like, people are already flipping out about what they better do and what they better not do. And the Star Wars Battlefront 2 beta, people are already freaking out about, DICE, you better not do this, and you better like, let the fucking game come out before you like try to rant. So I mean, EA doesn't have a great history, but still, like, they're doing like the no DLC package. They're doing like, give them a benefit of a doubt. And if the game's terrible, like, okay, fine. But like, if you pre-ordered, like, that was your choice. No one forced you to do that.
It's interesting because on one hand, I'm glad that we have this, like we were saying a little bit ago, like, I'm glad we can give the developer feedback and they'll listen. The flip side of that is, like, my coworker was like, did you play the Battlefront 2 beta? And I was like, yeah, it was sweet, right? And he's like, people are so pissed. And I was like, oh. He's like, didn't you play it?
And they're
like,
not even,
yeah, but I wasn't.
They don't even want to talk about how my experience was, what I thought. They want to talk about the buzz around it
Right.
more than they want to talk about the game itself, and that's really sad.
And once he was like, oh, well, there's this and there's this and this, it was hard not to be like, oh, I guess I didn't even think about that, because from my mindset, I don't give a shit what the internet said. I just
didn't
played
know
it.
about any of that when I played it, and I was like, okay, cool. So they incorporated like the boxes, like just like Battlefield, no big deal. And in Battlefield, you can buy the boxes to unlock the whole upgrade kit for a certain class or whatever. I don't personally really see a massive difference between the two.
I didn't see a big difference either, and I understand some. If it's true that you can play a class and then never level it up, that's a little shitty. But that's a pretty minor one. That's a pretty small difference between that and Battlefield. Some feedback, they can probably fix that pretty easily. No big deal. I wouldn't say it ruins the game. I mean, the gameplay, it was still a gorgeous game. The guns were phenomenal. It was so much fun to play.
Yeah, and compared to the first Battlefront, some of the mechanical issues that were in that, they did a lot right.
And there's still so much more depth.
Improvements.
I mean, there's so much to do in it. Like, even just with the limit in the beta, I was like, this is already like more fun and more deep than Battlefront 1. This is going to be great. And then I found out what the internet was saying, and it was like, well, there's some good points there, but I think it's a little too much. Like, this is still an amazing game, and like people are shitting all over it.
None of it's real yet. Like I think there was even a disclaimer on there that said like these do not reflect final battle pack drops or whatever they're called. I tend to side with like this developer who says that it's just like they just don't talk about it because everyone flips out and they don't really fully know what they're talking about. I tend to side with that view.
Right. Well, and I think you and I agree at least on this, that we think that cooler heads should prevail. We should be a little more reasonable, and like we try and think of the whole big picture, which is why we do a podcast, because we're trying to evaluate these things from a full everyone's standpoint. I think it's kind of cool that developers are still creating, and I think kudos to them that some of these guys are getting like death threats and shit, and they must really love developing to not just be curled up in their desk somewhere, because I don't know if I would continue doing some job if be like, I'll fucking kill you if I see you on the street. Like, really, dude? Like, it's a video game. You had fun playing it. Maybe we shouldn't be threatening real people with real lives and like making them feel like shit about something they spent hundreds and hundreds of hours pouring their heart in. Yeah. I think the internet, and maybe it's that anonymity. I can never say that word.
Anonymity.
Maybe it's the anonymity of it all, where it's like it's not a real person on the other side of this or whatever. I don't know if that's what it is, but it's kind of cool.
But I think it's part that, and I think it's like if I throw rocks at the man in the tower and I hit him in the face, like I'm famous too. It's like it's some of that. Like,
sure. Well, like we said, people are making businesses out of that and careers out of it. And can you imagine like just putting on your resume, I talk shit for money?
Right.
Yeah, I really want to hire that guy. I mean, obviously you'd make it sound nicer than that, but if you really think about what some of these people,
that's a lot of what they're doing.
I hated on things and was super critical, and I got paid money for it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, so I think your quote is actually really relevant. Like, it's not the critic who matters. And I really do applaud a lot of the developers who are just making cool shit in the face of all this toxicity. But I think I would like to just point out that it doesn't seem to be the gaming culture specifically. It does seem to be internet culture. Like that online, everybody has a voice, everyone can get on the soapbox and start screaming kind of thing, because clearly it's happening with film as well. So I think, but gaming and online, like being online and spending a lot of time online, those are a little bit closer more than watching a film and being online. So I think gaming tends to take more flack, but I don't think, I mean, if you read book reviews on Amazon, some of them are just as ignorant. I don't know. I don't think it's a gaming exclusive thing. I think it's an online megaphone plus anonymity kind of thing.
Yeah, I think you're right. And one of my bigger concerns, I think, with all this is just that you've got the vocal minority, obviously, the people who like to yell and scream, and they don't necessarily represent everyone, the people who are more level-headed and more reasonable. I think what bothers me the most is when I talk to coworkers or friends who are like, well, I was excited, but then I saw this YouTube video, and now I don't want to. It's like the quiet majority starts being swayed by that really loud minority, and then all of a sudden, that's where I think it becomes a problem. Like, I don't mind some jackass saying stupid, ignorant shit. Like, that's that's America, First Amendment, whatever, congratulations. But when it starts, like, when they start truly harming things or swaying public opinion to the point where people are no longer trying stuff out, that's where I start getting
I think with the Battlefront 2 beta, like, there was someone put, it was like in all caps, like, DICE, you must change this. And it was like, it had like 5,000 upvotes. votes or something like that. Like, that's insane. You don't even know what the game fully is. And clearly, according to these developers, they don't totally know what they're asking for anyway. And
right. Yeah, and from that Kotaku article, and like, it's not that hard to change an engine, and you're like, dude, you're like 15. What do you know about coding? And
yeah, they took one class on like game programming or something like that, and they think they know.
More likely, they saw a YouTube video
right.
where some jackass explained it, and that guy took one class. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's. Yeah. I kind of hope down the line we start seeing some more reasonable, cooler heads. Maybe enough reasonable people coming together and being like, "Shut up! You don't know what you're talking about." And hopefully, those people can start swaying.
Yeah,
getting
maybe
some
we're
authority.
getting old because it's like I tend to lean toward like the free market, right? Like if say they do it, and like God forbid the mob doesn't come out with pitchforks and torches to stop the bad developers from doing whatever they're doing. Like if it really is that egregious, people are going to stop playing the game, and then it will go away, and then a better game will take its place. Like that's usually what happens. An indie developer comes from underneath and makes something way better. PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds like took the internet by storm by just being a scrappy little startup thing.
Right. And even in the case of like, let's say Destiny 2, where everyone was like, it's dead, don't play it. It's still doing great because most of us are like, shut up, we're going to play it. We like it, unapologetically.
Yeah.
And I think that's good. And I hope we continue to see more of that.
Any final thoughts on how online media and media in general influences gaming?
I like the interface. Like I said, I like the accessibility. That's a really cool thing.
And yeah, I mean, it is a good feedback mechanism for developers when used well.
But for those of you out there just spreading hate and anger just to turn a buck or get a click.
Or trying to get your 15 minutes of fame by throwing a rock at someone who's actually doing real
shame
work.
on you.
Thank you for listening to Save Every Universe. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us money at patreon.com/Save Every Universe and go listen to all of our other episodes. I guess we just do this more often.
Yeah, we do this more regularly. I think you got more stressed out about the music thing sometimes.
Because I have high standards, Robbie. That's where the sweat on my hat came from. Maybe if you were there to do the work.
If I wore hats, you wouldn't even be able to read the logo for how much I sweat. That's why I don't wear hats.